Hello and welcome to the Miko Bits Show, and I'm your host, Miko Bits. And today we have an exciting guest. It's Maureen Fan, who is the founder and CEO of Baobab Studio, which is an aspiring Disney of the Metaverse. So they're really building amazing award-winning content, and we'll talk a lot about their upcoming release, Momoguro. So really excited to hear a little bit about this new title and a lot about this perspective on how to create the metaverse. So without further ado, Maureen, welcome to the Miko Bits Show.
Thank you for having me, Miko.
Absolutely. So first things first, would really love to understand a bit about your background. So I think, this is sort of exciting kind of background in the entertainment industry through Zynga. So I'd love to kind of have you talk a little bit about kind of how did you get into this space, and, tell me a little bit about how Baobab Studio was born.
Sure. Well, I always knew I wanted to do entertainment media, whether it's films or games. When I went to Stanford, I designed my major. It was computer science, art, and psychology, because that's the perfect thing to create any of those things. But, being from an immigrant family that my parents came from Asia, they said I'd be poor and destitute if I followed my dreams. So forbade it. So instead of going to Lucasfilm, where I was hoping to go, I went to eBay instead as a UI designer, because if you learn computer science, art, and psychology, UI design is also a perfect thing to go into. So I did UI design, cultural anthropologist, product management, product strategy at eBay, all these different jobs, and I loved it, but I still really loved animation. So I was hoping that I save enough money for my stock options so that I could pursue what I really wanted to do. I really want to go get an MFA, so I could do animation.
Wow.
But then when it came time to do it, I was taking local art classes at the community college and like figure drawing classes, all these things. But the deadline, 5 years had passed. I realized the deadline had passed for the MFA. But round 3 of business school was still available. And my mom's like, why don't you apply to business school? And I said, because I fucking hate business. But, like a dutiful daughter, I did. So I applied, and then I got in. I got into Harvard Business School, and I was like, no, I'm not doing it. I don't want to do business. I hate business. I want to go do art. And my boss at the time, Susan Kim, said, don't be an idiot. You just think Hollywood's sexy, but you don't know. Go try it before you say no to Harvard. So I'm like, all right. So I emailed everyone in the Stanford alumni database for any jobs, and ended up becoming assistant to Zach Braff, Joseph Gordon-Levitt's talent manager, driving packages around LA for film. Learned that everything is a business at the end of the day, and that business people often take advantage of creative people. I wasn't going to let that happen to me, and that my mother is always right. Anyway, so I went to business school, and then between my business school years, I went interned at Pixar, at Toy Story 3. But I really want to be part of creating something new. So I joined Zynga right when they started, right when I graduated. And I started off as a senior PM on games such as like virtual worlds, like Yeovil, Petville, Farmville, like all these games. And then eventually rose and became vice president of the games. So I created the game Farmville 2 and launched it.
Amazing.
And it was best. And so that's when I was promoted vice president. And then I looked over the Farmville franchise overall, and then ultimately new IP as well, reporting into CEOs Don Matrick and also Mark Pincus. So it was a great experience of learning, especially on the number side, right? Because Zynga didn't approach the business the way other people approached business, which is on the creative side is oftentimes the person with the loudest voice or the most senior person, or the one with the marker at the whiteboard who gets to talk. But that's where I really learned about how numbers can inform rather than just only gut instinct. But at the same time, when you are in entertainment, there's the artistry of it, right? So I was always trying to figure out how to merge the right and left brain. Anyway, this entire time, I still loved animation. So nights and weekends, I worked with my 2 friends, Dai Tsutsumi and Robert Kondo, who were art directors, production designers at Pixar. and we worked on a short film called The Dam Keeper, which was nominated for an Oscar. So I loved it, but I also couldn't figure out how to make it into a real business, because unless you have unfair distribution advantage or shit tons of capital, it doesn't make sense to go compete against a Disney or DreamWorks or Pixar. But when VR came about, I saw that as my opportunity, because when there's new technological disruption, no one has an advantage, and it doesn't matter how much money Disney might have, no one knows what they're doing. So I'm like, this is great. I can create a kick-ass team, make a name for ourselves, our brand and company in VR, and like a Trojan horse, and then branch out from there and take the IP into different mediums. So that's exactly what we've done. My other co-founder, Eric Darnell, he directed all the Madagascar films and Ants. He's the fourth highest grossing box office animation writer director of all time. And then Larry Cutler, my CTO co-founder, he was the head of technology at DreamWorks Animation and early days Pixar, and like Toy Story 2, Monsters Inc., all these Finding Nemo, all these amazing films. So we came together with my games board, and then we just formed the company. And so we've been working on creating awesome story IP and franchises.
Yeah, that is amazing. And I definitely think it's great that you're talking about sort of your Asian parents, the background, right? That's always a like amazing part of a founder's journey, right? Because in a sense, being Asian myself, like, I definitely can identify with sort of the pressures to do right, by your family. There's sort of this feeling of like doing things that are more reputable, so there's kind of a really interesting tension, right? And in a way, like, that's an amazing part of your navigation, because you've been doing things sort of quantitatively, as well as qualitatively. So there's sort of art, and in a way, like what you're doing now is sort of these incredible extremes, right? Because on the one hand, there's sort of creativity and there's art, and there's this very, very subjective, beautiful experiences, right? And then, when you get into places like Zynga, you're really dealing with like quantitative, right? You're really dealing with kind of what does the data say, and like how do we, so it's super interesting. I'd love to kind of get your quick comment on how do you see how these two worlds connect, because ultimately, like, it's almost like heaven and earth, right? Like there's this very grounded feeling in the numbers, but then there's also this incredibly spacious and fantastic kind of leap of faith that comes with things like story or visual design or art. So, tell me more. It's kind of brain and heart.
Well, that's what my entire, like they always tell you a series of brand yourself. And that's my brand, which is the ability to merge right and left brains, because from my culture and how I was raised, for like the immigrant mentality to business school, right? And it's all about the straight path, like the quantitative, what's practical. But I want to make art. And so it was interesting when I joined Zynga, because I feel like in general, oftentimes entertainment industries are money losing industries. Like, I think the film business itself is overall a money losing industry, but they're big winners, right? But a lot of losers. So overall, it doesn't make complete sense. So the people who do it because they can't help it. They love it. So it's an act of passion. It's like, I can't do anything else. I love this. And then you hope that you're the one that's going to be super successful, right? So it's not very practical. So when I first went into Zynga, I was very miserable the first few months. I remember after work, I would go to this strip mall that would have, like, I would get the McDonald's apple pie, and then I would get the L&L Hawaiian barbecue siren, and then I would go to the Krispy Kremes, and I'd just like cry and eat it, because I'm like, what am I doing? I'm doing art. But that was until I had power. But I'm thankful, because that's when I learned, like, you think also as a UI designer, because I was more art than I was quantitative. The UI design also requires like the computer science, actually think about what consumers want part, not just like what I want. So it was more practical, always had that practical side in me. But I loved it when the numbers proved me wrong, because I'd be so sure that this was the right way. And then I actually put it out there on an A/B test and realized I was wrong, or realized I was right. And I would get immediate information about if I was right and wrong. So that is super powerful. Like, you come up with a feature on Monday, you work with your artists and engineers and code it on Tuesday, Wednesday, put it out on an A/B test on Thursday, and Friday it made the company $1 million. And they're like, I did that.
Wow.
I made that happen. And that cycle time is so fast. So it's like a drug, right? It's like, can I outdo myself? What can I do next week? What can I come up with? But being able to have the numbers and see the results so quick is the best way to learn, right? Because I'm learning what my customers and community actually wants, because based off of their actions. But the problem with that is you become so short-term focused, right? Like, a lot of PMs like to put everything there's this funny episode, right, in Mythic Quest, where they put out the head of monetization puts a casino in the middle of the game, and that's like nothing to do with the world at all. I'm like, such a PM move. Or at Zynga, you want to do the slot machine, or put basically like a slot machine as the first thing you see, but you might juice the numbers in the short term and feel that high, but ultimately you're hurting retention, because you're not feeding back into the core loop actions, which is what actually drives engagement and retention. So what I did for Farmville 2, I was like, okay, fine, I have the power now. I'm going to create a new mission for our team. It's going to be change the company, prove that quality drives business metrics.
Wow.
Prove that quality is created through collaboration. And this was in a way heretical at the time, because that's not the way you do, but I had enough political capital at the time to like I wanted. So what I did is I had the PMs, I had the game designers were always like, boom, numbers, because when the PMs were so much on this side, the game designers felt they had to go all the way to the other side to bring the company to the middle. Amazing. But I said the game designers, like, Mark Pinkett only cares about numbers. So if you can't speak in his language, you're never going to have power. So I put them through PM boot camp so they could speak the language. And then I had the PMs run to figure out which metrics were leading metrics versus trailing metrics. And I told the designers they're in charge of the leading metrics. So we make sure that all features that we come up with don't hurt retention, even if they give a short-term pop. So that was the way my philosophy about
it. I love the mindset. One of the things I've been thinking a lot about is what I call deep replayability, right? Deep replayability. And one of the things that I'm reacting to when you're describing the kind of slot machines, right, is that slot machines are almost like a shark. Like, if you look in the history of evolution, there are sharks that have the exact same appearance that are like 100 million years old, right? And so, like, slot machines became digital, but the amount of time that the things spin is actually the same amount of time that they used to spin, right? Which is the perfect amount of time, right? Like, the session length of it promotes sort of dopamine addiction, and it's just this insane evolutionary form. And the thing that's amazing is how big of a crutch it must be for people who are numbers addicted, right? Because if you just put a slot machine in, like people will addictively do that, and much to their detriment, right? And so you get shallow replayability very cheaply. So I guess I'm really interested to kind of like get your thoughts, right? Because replayability, really, to me, the way I think about replayability is like things like books that you read over and over and over, and that it feels like what's happening, right? Yeah. If you read a book again and again and again, to me, what's happening is there's layers of a mindset, but that the mindset is actually informed by like a culture, right? And then below that, there's kind of like history, right? So if you look at Lord of the Rings, there's sort of like Old English, right? And there's kind of this very deep kind of mythological roots. So you're really talking about a mindset and a culture, because that takes a long time. Like I got obsessed with reading like Homer and like ancient Greek literature, right? And in a way, there's an entire like deep culture and mindset. And every time I read it, I feel like I'm learning something, right? So that's the opposite of this, right? So it feels like, to me, that is a huge tension with just sort of deep versus shallow replayability. And the funny thing about shallow replayability is it works, right? That's the crazy part, is that there are so many freaking slot machines on this earth, and they just make so much money. So like, I guess, how do you kind of react to that?
Not to diss slot machines, because it works for juicing, but ultimately it leads to long-term retention and engagement decay, because what you would see is it may juice the numbers in the short term, but if you are taking away from the core of your game, which is the core loop actions, we actually showed, and this is what my game designers helped with specifically, like while PMs might care about the short-term metrics of that immediate drug addiction boost, the game designers cared about the game in the long term. The short term actually would hurt the long-term metrics. So in showing that in the data, we said, okay, you still are governed by metrics, but you can't just be governed by these trailing metrics that are like actually very short-term metrics. Each feature that comes out needs to increase core loop actions. So if you try to put a slot machine in there, it's not going to increase core loop actions, and we know that will lead to long-term game decline. So that's how we, mastermind and try to find the balance, still using metrics, but between short-term and long-term, right? So it's about looking at the right metrics and the right time frame of things. And like slot machines can be super successful, but that's not, also there's just integrity of what you want to create. So I'm not interested in building a slot machine, right? I wanted to create Lord of the Rings. I want to create something that's going to last, especially on the story side, right? The story side forever.
I kind of love the aspiration. I just want to peel back just really quick back to slot machines, right? Which is that in a way, like that is sort of like this shark-like thing, it's super cheap and it's easy to grab. But like, to me, I think your deep aspiration is something that's quite exciting to me in the context of NFT. And the reason why I think it's very exciting in that context is NFT means object permanence, right? It means the creation of an object that is effectively immortal. They're immortal objects, right? And the thing that our immediate first reaction has been as an industry is to basically just spew NFTs, right? So in a sense, you have this medium that creates durable, immortal, lasting objects, but connected to very throwaway, garbage, trashy stories and narratives. And so there's no meaning, right? It's just, we're just spewing. And it's kind of this weird land grab where everybody's just trying to spew whatever and sell whatever, right? So to me, I think one of the things I'm excited about with what you're working on is that you really actually do have a deep, abiding passion for NFTs that are sort of worth kind of a durable narrative, and that should be part of a lasting story, right? I was talking about Homer and Greek literature, so there's books that have been around for thousands of years, right? So like, those lasting, durable stories are really what I think are the future of lasting, durable digital objects, right? Which are NFTs. So I guess I'd love to segue there to talk a little bit about Momoguro. So maybe you can talk a little bit about kind of how that world works, right? Because you're sort of a world creator.
Yeah. And about that point specifically, I our company ultimately is not, we create Web3 projects, but ultimately what we do is we create story franchises. And we believe that great stories transcend any medium. Like Shakespeare was great as like in a book, it's great performed as a play, it's great as a musical, it's great as animation, Lion King, right? And it's great as a movie. So for me, it's all about building those great characters and stories that transcend and can live on forever. So that's ultimately what we do. But what Web3 allows me to do is what I was talking about before about Zynga, letting my customer community let me know exactly what they want and give me feedback right away versus like me spend like 2 years creating something that maybe they don't like. That's what Web3 allows us to do, right? Instead of also only be looking at TV like these 3 streamers and like having them give me my fate. I want my community to actually be determining my fate, not like these gatekeepers, right? So while though I do love the streamers, like we have announced 2 series with Disney Plus and HBO Max, etc. I love them, but the power of Web3 is lets me get closer to the community. But Momoguro, I'm very excited about. Momoguro is this fantastical world on the Uno plane, and the message is about unity. We are better together. So there are these different races in the world, and what they realize is with the magical power of Momoguro, which is the Momoguro energy, they can fuse, and you could fuse an infinite number of these momos to create giant momo beasts that have all the powers of the individual momos, but with a combination, even more added powers. So for me, I'm excited because there's infinite combinations of powers, and I think that allows people to really express who they are. But of course, each of these powers are different. Like each of the momos in this world are a little bit unbalanced. They need each other. So it's again the message of we're better together. Like you could go in on by yourself and you could succeed, but if you're with somebody else, you could actually do even better if you find complementary skill sets. So that's why I personally am really excited about this IP.
I'm pretty interested because one of the things is that the number one top global IP is Pokemon, right? So there is this kind of idea there where they really think about nature and evolution as kind of the mechanism for transformation and kind of acceleration and advancement of kind of essentially these character prototypes, right? But one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is kind of when we go back to the idea of replayability, one of the things that's very interesting is kind of combinatoric complexity, right? So, in a sense, when you look at a game like League of Legends, right, like really largest esports game in the world, couple 100 million players base, so very, very significant. And they really achieved replayability through combinatoric complexity, right? So you really have like 150 or so champs, right? Everyone has like, basically 4 abilities, including an ultimate ability, 2 summoner spells, right? So when you actually see gameplay, you see the results of this combinations, right? So you end up seeing like really, so every game you actually see a combination that you never saw before. And I feel like Momoguro has some of that amazing potential for combinatoric, both expression, right? So that players can feel that they're reflective of their own play style and their personality. But I think also that, maybe there's a potential for sort of novel gameplay where these different elements can be, because in a sense, like when you think about itemization in something like League of Legends, like that is how characters add novel powers, right? So they have like, oh, I have Azonias, I can kind of like freeze myself and be indestructible, so like Momoguro kind of has that playful quality where you gain powers by like recombining these kind of character elements. I don't know what you call them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, as the business person, the business part of my brain was really excited about that because it's almost also in a way UGC, right? Because it's like whatever you want, and then you also want to experiment to see what happens if I combine. It's like crafting, basically, in a way, to see what comes out of it. And so there's infinite numbers, and we can always add another one in too.
I'm super fascinated when you describe it as a crafting mechanic, right? Because typically what happens in these kind of like massively multiplayer game scenarios is that crafting is really about combining kind of materials. And obviously, ultimately, the materials can be wearable equipment. So you can use that to customize your character. But this is a big twist, right? Because it really involves combining kind of characters at some level, right? So that's a really funny and interesting way. And it's, in a way, it reminds me of almost like something like, the Disney kind of Inside Out, this feeling of like these emotional characters that can be combined or expressed, right? So there's a lot of really fun things you can do. So I guess I'm curious how you see sort of the essential nature of this character combination crafting landscape.
It's hard. So I can't reveal much more because I'm not allowed to reveal more. But one important thing is about working together requires sacrifice, right? It's not just like, oh, all happy. There's a reason, like even in politics or worldwide, you might want to be selfish or think about the individual instead of like thinking of the larger community. So again, the themes of we're better together requires sacrifice. So I can't reveal much more than that, but it's hard. And also it's not like these momos are your slaves either. They're not, it's not like Pokemon where they have to do battle for you.
Yes.
There has to be a compatibility component. And
wow.
They need to want to help you. It's not like you're my slave, because that's not in with the ethos of we are better together. If you're my slave, right? So it doesn't work that way. So yeah.
Oh, so it's kind of because
detail. I probably raised that too much. Yes.
No, it's wonderful and exciting, right? Because obviously, like when you think about things like equipment, right? Like you can think about like Transformers and you're like, I'm going to put more guns on my robot, so that's very kind of deterministic, right? And whereas you're talking about something that's more organic and something where each of these components might not want to recombine the way that you think is best. So you got to work with what you have. I think this idea of sacrifice is such a dynamic construct, right? Because one of the things that happens in multiplayer gaming in the history, when you go back to classic titles like World of Warcraft, you're talking about guild behavior, right? So I'm really curious how you see multiplayer, right? And how do you see the dynamics of multiplayer? Because obviously when you're saying that you're better together, it's not just about crafting and combining individual character elements. It's also about multiple players, right? So how do players play together, and how do you envision that thematically?
So I can't go into detail about games because we have announced that there's also, a Metaverse game. So that many different ways in which the IP goes out. But yes, in all aspects, we're encouraging people to play together. And when you play together, it is better. That's all I can say for that. But yeah, my background, Zynga, play together, which is the power of social gaming.
That's wonderful, right? Because to me, when you do, because you're really talking about a transmedia franchise, right? You're talking about effectively sort of player ownership, or you're talking about at least player influence, right? You're very interested in kind of like having your players telling you, what's getting them excited, so I think that kind of feedback loop is super vital for NFT and the evolution of this kind of space, right? So I think people who are kind of buying in at an early, especially with kind of scarce NFTs, I think it becomes really, really interesting, right? Because obviously all of these things become historical markers. And I think the aspiration is so interesting because, it's a purposeful attempt to create this kind of durable transmedia franchise, multi-generational IP, and it sounds like 4-quadrant IP, right? It sounds like you're talking about like men, women, children, like age and like gender, right? So you're talking about very, very open, right? So I think, those are amazing. And to me, like when you're talking about kind of like people being better together, like those are kind of like, I would think of them as universe rules, right? Like, so in a sense, like you're talking about multiple game future games, right? You're talking about something very durable, right? So if you look at durable IP like, Mario Brothers, or, like, there's tons of games, right? So there's just many, many games. But the thing that's been tremendous is that there's a consistency in the universe, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we focus on building, which is how do you build worlds and characters that will last forever. So, for example, and you could just apply the same for Momoguro based off of past things we've done. So we created Baba Yaga, the VR game experience. We also created a 2D animated short. So those together won the 3 Emmys. Then that's getting turned with Disney Plus into a Witchverse TV anthology series. Or Intercats has been announced to, we have a multi-series graphic novel series. But it's also been announced as a Disney Plus series as well. So we put in our studio, we have a publishing division, we have a gaming division, and a TV film division. And we don't do any IP that is not able to go across all of those media. So when we think about it, we do think about it as a universe, and we don't care which medium it goes out in first. It's more, does that story, that universe, that world have legs? Which medium is it best suited for first? How do we mastermind which one is first? And then how do we ultimately connect all of them to one another? So imagine for Momoguro, we have a master universe plan about how the mediums like fit with each other. Yeah.
I love this because when you think about like the Riot Games Runeterra universe, right, they're really now starting to deploy the IP into third-party games, right? So third-party games are now starting to sort of adopt Runeterra constructs, right? So there's this, it's really interesting, right? So there's kind of a new game that just got announced where, it's all about like Silas and like how he's going to play in this new kind of fragment of this kind of universe, right? So I feel like one of the exciting things about this from an NFT perspective is that this is really super forward thinking in the sense that like NFTs I've been thinking about as tickets to entertainment, right? So in a sense, like, the idea that you have something that's a durable ticket that will continue to last, on and on through the ages, right? I think the other thing that this strikes me is when we talked about 4Quadrant, one of the shocking things about top IP is kind of how cute it is, right? Which is Hello Kitty. So Pokemon's 1, Hello Kitty's number 2, right? And then number 3 and 4 are actually Mickey and Friends, and then Winnie the Pooh, right? And then, Mario is actually slightly cute with like, all the kind of characters and the cartoonishness of it. So I guess I'm curious about how you see this as like a multi-generational IP, right? Because one of the things that can happen is that you can have kind of maybe adult players who are playing with their kids, or like, there can be this kind of trend, because if the IP is durable, like the top 5 IP in the world are all kind of like multi-generational IPs. So I'm curious how you see kind of how do you do market entry? How do you see younger players versus maybe their parents or question marks? So how do you see that kind of audience segmentation?
So you want to, it's what, for example, Pixar has done very well, right? They have a main character, and that might be the like target middle audience. But like, for example, in The Credibles, it's really about mom and dad, right? But you have characters of every single age that you can connect to. So it's like, you're going to bring your kids there, but it's something that you would also enjoy yourself. And secretly, you would want to go even if you didn't have kids anyway. So that's the way we think about it. So we make sure that the main character, so for example, Monsters Inc., there's Boo, but the real story is honestly between Sully and Mike, right?
Yeah.
So, but they're adults-ish. They're monsters. That's the great thing when they're not human, by the way. You can make them any age that you want to. But you can expect in our universe that there are, well, we've talked about in a Discord, there's like the elders, right? There's characters of different generations.
Yeah. So all of this kind of like community ownership, kind of durable IP, intergenerational lasting stories, 4Quadrant IP, transmedia franchise, like all this stuff is just so invigorating and exciting. So I'm super excited about Momoguro jumping in, trying to get some of that NFT. I guess from my vantage point, we're kind of rounding up on the top of the hour. So what I wanted to do is get from you kind of what are the best ways to follow? Like how can viewing audience jump in? How can they participate in the community? How can they learn more? Where should they go?
Yeah. So they should, first of all, they would sign up for text alerts. So they go to Momoguro, is momoguro.com. Sure, that's right.
We'll put a link.
Yeah, momoguro.com. Go on there and you can just press the button to sign up for text alerts and also join our Discord.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And also follow us on Twitter. There's Momoguro NFT.
Yeah, excellent. So follow on Twitter, right? And, we'll put the links in the comments on our YouTube. And if you're coming in over, audio only podcasts, momoguro.com. So definitely, do that. And Google will probably correct your spelling if you give it your best shot. So, we'll get you connected one way or the other. So, this is definitely like a profound, as all with NFTs, like a big community effort. There's a lot of opportunities to engage, and I think,
our community is amazing.
Yeah, I bet it's exciting. So please jump in. And I guess what I would love to do also is just to get your quick roadmap, right? So I'd love to understand kind of where are we in Momoguro land and like, where are we going and by when? And like, what's in your roadmap?
Well, we'll be announcing more details soon, but I can tell you that minting will be in Q1. So that's
wow.
Good. So if you follow the text alerts, all that stuff, you'll figure out when, and then we'll be announcing closer to the date everything that you just talked about. But it includes tons of brand extensions, like all the things that I just was talking about. What we do with all of our IP, right? Which is how do we put it across different mediums in exciting ways.
Wow. Absolutely exciting. I think this is just such an amazing thing to witness, right? Which is, we're witnessing kind of not only the birth of a new kind of IP franchise and a durable multi-generational franchise, but we're kind of witnessing a transmedia franchise with kind of some amount of sort of user input control, like community. So I think this is really incredibly fresh and experimental. Can you just, as a closing note, like I know you're really kind of a pioneer in the vanguard of virtual reality, as well. So I think that, this has a metaversal dimension. So how do you see virtual reality or, augmented reality or these types of new tools that are emerging kind of as parts of the universe or as parts of the overall experience?
I'm super excited about both VR and AR and have always been. That being said, I think it's going to take time. I think the audience that have purchased headsets are very engaged. So you have an audience that will is excited about trying everything out there. So I think there's huge opportunity there. And also it's like, in a way, the best way to experience something. Our mission is to inspire you to dream, bring out your sense of wonder, make you matter. And that make you matter part is the thing that differentiates us from all other entertainment, media companies, animation studios out there, because we're not happy with just creating content that you can just watch passively. We want you to have a role, for you to have a relationship with the other characters. Because you have a relationship with those characters, you care what they think about you, they care about what you think of them, and that changes the story, right? And what better way, like you could do that in, you matter for sure in a game. But you might be thinking about yourself, right? Because it's not completely real. So the analogy I like to give is there's a little girl crying on a park bench. She's too young to be there by herself. Let's say it's 4 a.m. in the morning. In a movie, you feel all sorts of feelings for her, but you wouldn't get out of your theater seat to help her, right? In a game, you'll have to go up and talk to her, but maybe the reason you do it is because you're trying to get information for the quest or to get to the next level.
Yeah.
And in real life, you talk to her because you actually care about her. You want to help her. So we're trying to create experiences that have the empathy of film, the agency of games where you can do something about your feeling, but the motivation of real life where you're actually doing it because you care. And part of getting you to care is believing that it's real. And part of feeling that it's real and there are real stakes and consequences is to actually get rid of the interface between you and that screen, like the controllers and all. And so VR is not even there yet either, where you're like still like, which button do I press? But when you're actually in that environment, you feel that that girl's real. Your lizard brain thinks that that thing is real. Then you care so much more, and it can get so much more of your feelings out. So I'm really excited about it, and that's why I'm excited also about the metaverse. VR is in a way where we came from, and metaverse is where we're going, but I don't see them as opposite, right? I feel that they work together. It just takes a while for that headset not to be clunky and annoying to to put on. But when we get there, that's going to be the ultimate, expression in my mind of what it is that create any entertainer, a filmmaker, a game maker, whatever can create.
Yeah, so, as is customary for our show, I do disclose that my fund, Gumi Cryptos Capital, is an investor in Baobab Studios. So I just want everyone to understand that context. But, obviously, to me, that's actually a signal, and it's a sign of our excitement. So we really went in hook, line, and sinker on this. So we just think that there couldn't be a more exciting entrepreneur who sort of was right at the cusp of the creation of Zynga and this sort of social gaming phenomenon that kind of opened the doors of gaming to an entire new group of gamers, right? So I think that was a fundamentally transformative moment in media and in gaming, right? So I think that, we're now kind of edging our way slowly into the metaverse. And, I think that Momoguro and Baobab Studio and Maureen will definitely be there at the vanguard. So, I think it's been an exciting episode. So thank you so much.
Thank you.